So the IOC travels around the planet. They get these sucker cities to bid on the games. You pay an enormous amount of money to be a candidate city. You pay even more when you get to the short list. And then if you actually get the games, then you discover that there's a whole other batch of things you're going to pay for. The IOC comes in. They make their television marketing deals. They make their they sell their products, and they scoot out of town each and every time with about $2 billion in profit every time they hold the games. And they pay no taxes on Earth, anywhere on Earth. In fact, even in Switzerland, where they're headquartered, they're considered to be a non-profit organization. So we don't really know what they do with their money. They say, well, they give it, most of it, to international sporting federations and to the National Olympic Committees, and maybe they do, but since they're not audited, we don't know for a fact what they do with their money. So they're making an enormous amount of money. So the reality is not the happy joy version that you're going to read in the Vancouver Sun. The reality is the profits for the developers, the profits for the IOC, and then the rest of the reality is what it ends up costing us. We are paying for the Olympics to come here. So when we were first told the absolute total budget would be something like $600 million, and now we know the overall cost is well over $6 billion. And that's just the money we know about. We don't know how much more they've spent because they have many little pockets they can hide the money in. So for example, Olympic security costs that were originally pegged at $175 million when Jack Poole first put in his bid book, we now know from RCMP documents this was a totally imaginary number. He made it up. He made it up because he thought he could sell it to the public. And 3 levels of government colluded since 2002 to pretend that that was the real number until they finally had to admit it last October, that the real cost was well over $1 billion. And in fact, we know it's probably vastly higher than that because other Olympic cities have been well over $1 billion. So London right away is looking at probably a $3 billion security budget. So the costs have exploded, and it, of course, lands on us. Jack Poole's not paying for this. John Furlong's not paying for this. Gordon Campbell's not paying for this. We are. What happens to the environment? Remember we were promised the greenest games ever? Remember that? Back in the day, that was supposed to be the hallmark of the Vancouver Olympics. Again, take a drive up, go past Eagle Ridge Bluffs, where Eagle Ridge Bluffs used to be, and you see this gouge in the earth, where they cut down something like 5,000 arbutus trees, one of the oldest, last old-growth forests on the south coast. They destroyed a wetlands. Larson Creek wetlands is a mess. Their concession to the environment was that the red-listed frog species that live there now can hop underneath the highway in little tunnels they've created for them. So that's how they're dealing with that issue. Up and down the Sea to Sky Highway, they've blown up bluffs, they've cut down thousands of trees, and then you get to the Callahan and you discover they did massive amounts of logging to create the venues and the roads and all the things there. So the entire butcher's bill for what they've done for the Olympics, the greenest games ever, is something like somewhere between 40,000 and 100,000 trees cut down, much of it old growth. Carbon dioxide emissions for, again, the greenest games ever is 3.5 megatons, and that's an underestimate. So that's the equivalent of 5% of British Columbia's total annual output, and how that could be considered green, I don't know. Wildlife habitat species at risk in both the Callahan, Eagle Ridge, and up and down the Sea to Sky corridor. So it's certainly not green. I just want to touch briefly on poverty. We all know that the poverty in Vancouver is horrible. There are 3,000, and I'm sure Megan can correct me if the numbers are actually higher, at least 3,000 homeless people in the streets of Vancouver. The number when we got the games was 600. Or something near that. It's now well over 3,000. David Eby from the BC Civil Liberties Association, when he was then in Pivot, got up in front of City Council 2 years ago and said, look, we have 2 years, we can still solve the poverty issue, the homeless issue in the city. We need $300 million. And he gave them a list of places they could take that money. And City Council said, well, we'd love to, but we can't. We simply don't have the money. And yet when their developer, when Millennium Development Corporation got into trouble, instantly the bank account opened. Instantly the property endowment fund was open. Instantly money was available to bail out Millennium. And that exactly shows you where the priorities are. The priorities are not for average people. They're certainly not for the homeless people. They're certainly not for the people who live in poverty in the city. They're certainly not for average taxpayers. They're certainly not for all of us. They are for the developer friends. Because the developer friends get money instantly. And the homeless, at best, get a shelter in the winter. A lot of people are not really aware of how much their ability to move in the city are going to be dramatically affected in 2010. It's not just the police presence. It's not just the presence of the other security forces, and the estimate now is 15,000. That's probably an underestimate. But the fact is that a lot of Vancouver will be behind security zones. The ability of ordinary people just to get to their jobs, the ability of you who are parents to get your kids to the dentist are going to be massively affected by the games. So when people say to me, well, the games are coming anyway, why can't you just enjoy it? And if you're going to protest, by the way, you're interfering with my enjoyment of the games. And I say, well, your party, your 17-day circus is interfering with my life. It's costing me a lot of money. And number two, I can't go about my daily life because of your games and the security clampdown that comes with it. So I think we really have to keep in mind that it's not us interfering with their party, it's their party interfering with our normal lives.
Now we're going to hear from Philippa Ryan from the Downtown Eastside Power of Women Group. Philippa?
When you hear about Olympics, you think about health, fitness, strength, endurance, and you see no Indigenous people as athletes anymore. I don't know when that stopped, but when I was growing up, there were always friendly games with soccer, baseball, softball, and people were very active, they were athletic. Now you don't see it. The powers that be have polluted our land, have made us beggars in our own country, and now they're trying to do that to the rest of you. They've downloaded their bad debts to you, and you're economic slaves now, you know. Who's going to pay for all that bad judgment on these so-called capitalists? And they're not capitalists if they have their parliament using their powers to whatever it is. Those it's just extortion. They're just gangs, and now they've got you in their power. They're going to start treating you like Indians. The powers that be make profit from our poverty and our misery, just the same way they're going to do to you. So now you see the true face of that power. And they won't make any distinction now between white, colored. You're going to be slaves, and that's all you're going to be. And they'll profit from your misery the same way they've done to us, all my relations. Thank you.
All information about the benefits and detriments of the Olympic Games is a fundamental factor for knowledge. Beyond knowledge, registering your opinion on nowpolling.ca so it can be counted and published is the complementary action towards demanding social change for social justice. Remember, your participation is the essence of direct democracy.